There is a way of thinking that quietly separates people who remain stuck from people who keep moving even when life becomes difficult. It is not about being smarter than everyone else. It is not about having better luck. And it is not about knowing exactly what to do at every moment. It is about where the mind learns to place its attention. Most people think they are looking for answers when they face a problem. But often they are doing something else. They are replaying what went wrong. They are revisiting the same frustration. They are trying to understand why the situation feels unfair, uncomfortable, or disappointing. And although that feels like thinking, it often leads to the same place: stress, confusion, delay. Because thinking about a problem is not the same as moving toward a solution. There is another way to think. A way that does not deny reality, minimize difficulty, or pretend that hard situations are easy. But it refuses to stay trapped in the gravity of the problem. It asks a different question. Not just, what is wrong? But, what can be done now? That shift sounds simple, but it changes everything. It changes how quickly you recover from setbacks. It changes how clearly you make decisions under pressure. It changes how you handle conflict, uncertainty, delay, disappointment, and doubt. And over time, it changes the kind of person you become. Because people who focus only on problems become excellent at feeling stuck. People who train themselves to focus on solutions become excellent at moving forward. This is not blind optimism. It is not positive thinking in the shallow sense. It is disciplined attention. And once you learn it, it becomes one of the most practical mental advantages you can develop. Chapter 1. The direction of attention. Every challenge contains at least two realities at once. There is the problem itself, and there is the possible path forward. The mind can recognize both, but it rarely focuses on both equally. It tends to lean in one direction, and whichever direction it chooses begins shaping your emotional state, your decisions, and your behavior. When attention locks onto the problem, thinking narrows. You begin circling the same details. You replay what happened. You revisit what was said. You imagine what should have gone differently. You mentally return to the moment again and again, as if one more pass through it will finally produce relief. But usually, it does not. It simply reinforces the problem. And because your attention remains there, your mind starts interpreting everything through that lens. You see more difficulty, more resistance, more reasons why progress will be hard. Now, notice what happens when attention shifts. Instead of asking, why did this happen? You ask, what can I do now? Instead of focusing on the entire weight of the situation, you focus on the next useful movement within it. That one change alters the internal atmosphere. The mind begins searching for action instead of explanation. It begins scanning for leverage instead of blame. It begins looking for possibility instead of proof that things are broken. This is why solution-focused thinking is not just motivational. It is functional. Your attention is like a flashlight in a dark room. It does not illuminate everything at once. It shows you what it is pointed toward. If you point it only at the damage, you will see the damage clearly. If you point it toward the exit, the tools, or the next step, you will begin seeing what can help. Imagine a team at work discovering that an important deadline has been missed. One person says, "This is a disaster. We should have seen this coming." Someone dropped the ball. Their attention goes immediately toward blame and frustration. The emotional tone of the room tightens. People become defensive. Energy is lost. Another person says, "All right, we are here now. What can still be completed today? What needs to be communicated? What is the biggest impact if we fix it first?" The problem has not disappeared, but attention has shifted. And because attention has shifted, the quality of thought changes. The room becomes more functional. Progress begins. The same principle applies in personal life. A difficult conversation with a partner can become an endless loop if your attention remains fixed on the unfairness of what was said. But if you redirect attention toward what the relationship needs next, the conversation changes. You become less interested in winning and more interested in repair. You ask better questions. You listen more carefully. You look for understanding instead of ammunition. This does not mean the problem is unimportant. It means your attention is too valuable to spend entirely on what cannot move. Many people believe progress begins when the situation improves. But more often, progress begins when focus improves. The first real solution is often not an action in the world. It is a decision in the mind, a decision to stop feeding the problem your full attention, a decision to redirect mental energy toward movement. That is why the direction of attention matters so much. It determines what becomes visible. It determines what becomes emotionally dominant. And it determines whether your mind becomes a place of momentum or a place of paralysis. Example: a project is behind. One person keeps asking who caused it. Another asks what can still be saved. One drains the room. The other helps the room work. Mini conclusion. The key idea is simple. Where your attention goes, your thinking follows. And where your thinking goes, your life begins to move. Chapter 2. Why the mind defaults to problems. If solution-focused thinking is so useful, why do so many people find it difficult? Because the human brain is not naturally trained for solution focus. It is naturally trained for threat detection. For most of human history, survival depended on quickly noticing what was wrong. Danger mattered more than comfort. Risk mattered more than possibility. The mind learned to prioritize what could hurt you, what could fail, what could go badly. That system is still active. Even in ordinary life, your brain constantly scans for what feels off. What is uncertain? What feels unstable? What may create loss, embarrassment, rejection, or disappointment? This is not a defect. It is part of being human. But in modern life, the survival brain often overreaches. It interprets non-danger as danger. A delayed reply feels like rejection. A mistake feels like personal collapse. An unanswered question feels like impending failure. And once the mind identifies a problem, it wants to stay close to it. It believes that continued attention equals protection. So it replays the issue. It rehearses scenarios. It imagines consequences. It tries to solve emotional discomfort through mental repetition. But repetition is not resolution. In fact, this is where many people unknowingly train themselves into unhelpful habits. They spend so much time focusing on what is wrong that the brain becomes more efficient at finding problems than at building responses. Over time, this creates a mental style. The person becomes highly sensitive to obstacles. They become excellent at spotting what might go wrong. But they become slower at turning insight into constructive action. This is why simply telling someone to think positively usually fails. The problem is not that they are choosing negativity in a shallow sense. The problem is that their attention has been conditioned. Solution-focused thinking is a retraining process. You are not trying to stop noticing problems. That would be unrealistic and unwise. You are learning to shorten the amount of time your mind remains trapped inside them. Notice the issue. Acknowledge the difficulty. Then redirect. What matters now? What is within my control? What is the next useful step? At first, this feels unnatural because it interrupts an old pattern. The mind wants to keep analyzing. It wants emotional certainty before action. It wants to understand everything before moving. But life rarely grants that luxury. In real situations, clarity often comes after movement, not before it. And one of the most important mental upgrades a person can make is to stop treating endless analysis as a requirement for progress. Think of a person who receives difficult feedback. If their mind defaults to problem focus, they may spiral into self-protection. They replay the criticism. They question how they were perceived. They imagine what this means about their future. Their attention becomes absorbed by discomfort. But a solution-focused mind still feels the sting of feedback while asking a better question. What can I improve from this? What is useful here? What action would make me stronger? The same event is being processed, but in a different way. One mind turns it into emotional entanglement. The other turns it into material for growth. That is the deeper value of this skill. It changes not only how you think, but what you can do with what happens to you. Example: a poor review at work can become proof that you are failing, or it can become information you use to improve. The event is the same. The mental direction is different. Mini conclusion: the brain naturally notices problems first, but progress begins when you train attention to move beyond detection and toward response. Chapter 3: The hidden cost of problem-centered thinking. Problem-centered thinking has a cost that is easy to miss because it feels so active. When the mind is busy, people often assume they are making progress. But mental activity can be deeply unproductive when it circles without direction. One cost is energy. When you keep replaying a problem, you drain yourself. You revisit the same tension. You think about the same conversation. You rehearse the same worry. And because nothing is moving, the mind remains open and unfinished. That unfinished state consumes energy in the background of your day. You may be sitting still, but internally you are working hard. You are carrying a constant cognitive weight. Another cost is distortion. The longer you stare at a problem without movement, the larger it appears. The mind begins filling empty space with assumptions. A delay starts to feel like a pattern. A disagreement becomes a threat. A temporary setback becomes evidence of permanent failure. This is one reason stress makes problems feel bigger than they are. Stress narrows perspective, and when perspective narrows, proportion disappears. A third cost is hesitation. When the mind becomes saturated with problem detail, action begins to feel more dangerous. You start waiting for perfect understanding. You tell yourself you need more clarity, more certainty, more confidence. But very often, what you call a need for clarity is actually fear wearing the mask of caution. The truth is that many situations do not become clearer just because you think about them longer. They become clearer because you engage with them. A person postpones a difficult conversation because they are trying to think it through perfectly. But every day they postpone, anxiety grows. The problem takes up more space. The imagined difficulty becomes heavier than the real conversation might have been. Or someone delays starting a project because they want a better plan. Yet the absence of action keeps the project abstract and intimidating. Once they begin, they often discover that the first steps were much simpler than the mind had made them. Problem-centered thinking also affects relationships. If you stay fixated on what another person did wrong, you become less able to see what the moment requires now. Repair becomes harder. Listening becomes harder. Perspective becomes harder. Your attention remains attached to what injured you instead of what might help the relationship recover. This does not mean the hurt is unimportant. It means healing requires more than replay. The same is true in work, decision-making, parenting, leadership, and personal growth. Problems need recognition, but they do not deserve endless residence inside your mind. One useful test is this. After thinking about an issue for 10 minutes, ask yourself, am I closer to a useful action, or am I simply more emotionally entangled? If you are more entangled, your mind has shifted from analysis into rumination. And rumination rarely improves outcomes. Solution-focused thinking does not eliminate complexity. It reduces unnecessary suffering caused by mental stagnation. It asks, what would actually improve this? What can be clarified? What can be communicated? What can be changed? What can be accepted so that energy can be redirected? These questions reopen movement. And movement is what problem-centered thinking tends to block. Example. If you replay one frustrating comment from a meeting all night, you lose energy, sleep, clarity, and proportion. If you ask what follow-up is needed tomorrow, the mind has somewhere useful to go. Mini conclusion. Problems consume energy when they become mental loops. Solutions return energy by giving the mind a direction to move. Chapter 4. Better questions, better thinking. One of the fastest ways to change the quality of your thinking is to change the questions you ask. Questions are not passive. They direct attention. They tell the mind what kind of material to search for. And because the mind will usually try to answer whatever it is asked, your questions become quiet architects of your emotional and mental state. If you ask, "Why does this always happen to me?" your mind begins searching for supporting evidence. It retrieves old disappointments. It builds a pattern. It reinforces helplessness. If you ask, "What can I do next?" your mind searches in a different direction. It looks for options, resources, actions, clarifications, openings. The event may be the same, but the internal process becomes completely different. This is why solution-focused thinking begins with disciplined questioning. A person who loses an opportunity can ask, "Why am I never chosen?" That question deepens discouragement. Or they can ask, "What can I learn from this, and what can I improve before the next opportunity?" That question creates a future. A parent dealing with a difficult season can ask, "Why is everything so hard right now?" Or they can ask, "What matters most today, and what would make today slightly better for this family?" The second question does not solve everything, but it converts overwhelm into direction. The goal is not to ask fake questions that force positivity. It is to ask honest questions that create movement. Here are several that are consistently useful. What is actually happening, separate from my interpretation? What part of this is within my control? What is the next useful step? What matters most right now? What would reduce the problem by even 10%? What am I assuming that may not be true? What response would make me respect myself later? These questions do something powerful. They create mental order. They separate facts from emotional exaggeration. They transform a foggy experience into something more navigable. Notice how different this is from the mind's default reactions. Default questions often sound like this. Why is this happening? Who caused this? What if this gets worse? What does this say about me? Why can't this be easier? Those questions are emotionally understandable, but they often intensify distress without creating a response. Solution-focused questions are quieter, more grounded, more directional. Imagine you send an important message and receive no reply. A problem-focused question is, "Are they ignoring me?" That question fuels insecurity and interpretation. A solution-focused question is, "What is the most reasonable next step if I do not hear back by tomorrow?" Now the mind has something useful to do. Or imagine a meeting goes poorly. A problem-focused question is, "Why did I ruin that?" A solution-focused question is, "What specifically weakened my communication, and what will I change in the next meeting?" Again, the same event. Different question. Different future. A person can spend years trapped inside painful and unproductive questions without realizing that the questions themselves are shaping the quality of life. One of the most practical forms of self-leadership is learning to interrupt those questions and replace them with ones that produce clarity. Example: a bad interview becomes either, "Why am I never enough?" or "What will I improve before the next one?" One question closes the future, the other builds it. Mini conclusion: your questions train your attention, and attention trained in the right direction becomes a source of calm, clarity, and constructive action. Chapter 5. Action creates clarity. Many people wait for clarity before they act. They want to feel sure. They want to understand the whole situation. They want confidence before movement. But in most real situations, clarity does not come first. Action does. This is one of the most liberating truths in solution-focused thinking. You do not need to see the entire path. You need to see the next useful step. Once you take that step, new information appears. New feedback appears. New understanding appears. And what was vague begins to sharpen. Think of trying to walk through fog. If you stand still waiting for the entire landscape to become visible, you may wait a very long time. But if you move carefully, even a few steps forward, the next section becomes clear enough to continue. Life works this way surprisingly often. A person wants to make a career change. They keep thinking about the ideal path. They compare possibilities. They worry about mistakes. They tell themselves they need more clarity. But what they may actually need is movement. One conversation, one application, one small course, one evening spent updating a resume. Action begins revealing what thought alone could not. The same is true in personal growth. Someone wants to become healthier. They keep planning the perfect routine. They read, compare, analyze, and postpone. But the moment they take one simple action, a walk, a better meal, a consistent bedtime, the fog begins to thin. Confidence grows not from planning perfectly, but from keeping promises to themselves in motion. Action also reduces emotional inflation. A problem that feels enormous in the abstract often becomes manageable when broken into movement. This is because action converts the mind from passive witness to active participant. You stop staring at the difficulty and start interacting with it. Of course, not all action is wise. Solution-focused thinking is not impulsive. It does not glorify random movement. It asks for useful movement, intentional movement, movement aligned with reality. What is the next conversation? What is the next clarification? What is the next simplification? What is the next concrete improvement? These questions make action smaller and more accessible. And smaller action is often what restores momentum. A person overwhelmed by finances may not be able to solve everything today, but they can identify the exact numbers. They can cancel one expense. They can call one creditor. They can create one page of order. A person overwhelmed by conflict may not be able to fix the relationship immediately, but they can pause before reacting. They can ask for a calmer time to speak. They can choose one sentence that reduces heat instead of increasing it. This matters because momentum is psychological as much as practical. Once the mind experiences movement, hope becomes more believable. And hope grounded in action is very different from vague hope. It is not wishful. It is earned. Many people think action requires confidence, but often confidence is the product of repeated action. You do something small. You survive it. You learn. You adjust. And because you adjust, you trust yourself a little more. That is how clarity grows, not as a gift that arrives before effort, but as a reward that appears during effort. Example: if you feel stuck on a big decision, take one concrete step that gathers information. Often, the next hour of action teaches more than the next week of worry. Mini conclusion: do not wait for complete clarity before moving. In many situations, movement is what creates the clarity you are looking for. Chapter 6: Emotional Regulation and Solution Thinking. Problems are not difficult only because of the facts involved. They are difficult because of the emotions they trigger. Fear makes the future feel smaller. Anger makes the mind want immediate release. Shame makes a person want to hide. Discouragement makes all options feel weaker than they are. This is why solution-focused thinking is not only cognitive, it is emotional. If your emotions dominate the moment, the mind will often lose access to its best reasoning. You may say something you regret, interpret too quickly, withdraw too soon, escalate when what is needed is steadiness. Emotional regulation does not mean becoming cold. It does not mean pretending not to feel. It means creating enough internal space that emotions can inform you without controlling you. One of the most useful habits is the pause. When a difficult moment hits, do not assume the first reaction is the wisest one. Pause. Breathe. Name what is happening inside you. Frustration, fear, embarrassment, pressure. This simple act changes your relationship to the feeling. Instead of becoming the emotion, you begin observing it. And once you can observe it, you regain some freedom. Then ask, what would actually help right now? That question is powerful because it interrupts emotional momentum. It redirects attention from expression to effectiveness. Imagine receiving a message that instantly irritates you. The reactive part of you wants to answer immediately, to correct, to defend, to release pressure. But if you pause and ask what would help, your response may change. Maybe you wait. Maybe you clarify instead of accuse. Maybe you choose a conversation instead of a text. Maybe you realize no response is needed tonight. That pause is small, but the consequences are often enormous. Or think of a parent in a stressful moment with a child. If they react from pure frustration, they may add fear to a problem that already needs guidance. If they pause, regulate, and ask what would actually help, their tone changes. Their presence changes. And because their presence changes, the child's response may change too. This is one of the quiet powers of regulated thinking. It protects you from turning a difficult situation into a worse one. Over time, emotional regulation becomes one of the foundations of trust. People trust those who can remain constructive under pressure. Leaders trust them. Families trust them. Friends trust them. And most importantly, they begin trusting themselves. Example: the message that would have started a fight often becomes a better conversation tomorrow if you regulate first. Mini conclusion: a calm mind does not ignore emotion. It uses emotion as information without allowing it to take control of the response. Chapter 7. Reframing without denial. One of the strongest tools in solution-focused thinking is reframing. Reframing means choosing a more useful interpretation of a situation without denying the facts. This is important. Reframing is not pretending something painful is pleasant. It is not forcing optimism where honesty is needed. It is the discipline of asking, what is the most constructive way to understand this reality? A setback can be framed as proof that you are failing, or it can be framed as information that your current approach needs adjustment. A delay can be framed as ruin, or it can be framed as time to strengthen preparation. A difficult person can be framed as nothing but obstruction, or they can be framed as a signal that better boundaries, better communication, or better expectations are needed. The situation does not magically improve because you change the frame, but your ability to respond often improves immediately. That is why reframing matters. Take someone who experiences rejection. If they frame it as evidence that they are not enough, they will likely shrink. Their next actions will come from wounded identity. If they frame it as a redirection, a mismatch, or feedback about fit, they remain available for movement. Their self-respect stays more intact. Their next decision improves. Reframing also protects people from turning temporary events into permanent identities. A mistake is not the same as being a failure. A hard season is not the same as a ruined life. A conflict is not the same as a broken future. The human mind often collapses categories when stressed. It turns one event into an entire story. Reframing restores proportion. Ask yourself, what else could this mean? What might this situation be teaching me? What interpretation keeps me honest, but also capable? What frame would help me respond wisely instead of emotionally? Those questions do not erase pain, but they prevent pain from becoming the only lens. Example: a delayed opportunity can be interpreted as final rejection or as more time to prepare better. The event is the same. The mental frame changes the response. Mini conclusion: how you frame a situation influences what becomes possible inside it. A better frame often becomes the beginning of a better response. Chapter 8. Breaking overthinking and making decisions under pressure. Overthinking is one of the most common ways people stay trapped in problem-centered thinking while convincing themselves they are being responsible. It feels serious. It feels intelligent. It feels as if one more round of analysis will finally produce the clarity you need. But overthinking is rarely clear thinking. Clear thinking moves toward decisions. Overthinking circles around them. The difference matters. When you overthink, you usually revisit familiar material. You replay the same fear, the same uncertainty, the same imagined outcome, the same unfinished conversation, the same question that never seems to settle. The mind keeps moving, but it is not moving forward. It is moving in loops. These loops are seductive because they create the illusion of control. If I keep thinking about this, maybe I can prevent pain. If I keep examining every angle, maybe I will avoid mistakes. If I keep mentally rehearsing, maybe I will finally feel ready. But readiness built on endless repetition is unstable. It often collapses the moment real action is required. Solution-focused thinking breaks the overthinking loop by asking a simple but powerful question. What is the purpose of this thought? Is this thought helping me understand something I can act on? Or is it merely extending discomfort? That distinction is crucial. Some thinking is necessary. Reflection matters. Planning matters. Review matters. But once thinking stops producing direction, it has crossed into rumination. One useful sign is repetition without progress. If you have thought about the same issue multiple times and nothing new is emerging, you probably do not need more thought. You need a shift. That shift may be action. It may be rest. It may be conversation. It may be writing the issue down so the mind stops carrying it in raw form. Writing is especially useful here. A problem inside the mind feels larger because it has no boundaries. It spreads. It blends with mood. It takes on emotional color, but once written down, it becomes more concrete. You can separate facts from assumptions. You can see the actual issue instead of the emotional cloud around it. Try this structure. What happened? What am I worried about? What part is real? What part is assumption? What is the next useful step? This transforms vague mental noise into something workable. Another solution-focused method is to set time limits for thinking. Give a problem 20 focused minutes. Think clearly. List options. Note next steps. Then stop. If no decision is possible yet, define what information is still needed and where it will come from. Without a boundary, the mind will often continue chewing on the issue because it believes unfinished thought equals unfinished safety. Movement also interrupts overthinking. A walk, a task, a phone call, a small administrative action related to the issue. These things may seem unrelated to insight, but they often restore perspective by changing your state. A stagnant body tends to support stagnant thought. Consider someone trying to decide whether to leave a job. For weeks, they think about it every evening. They replay frustrations, imagine risks, question their own judgment, but nothing changes. What would solution-focused thinking do? It would convert the vague problem into structured action. List the specific reasons for leaving. List the real risks of leaving and the real risks of staying. Update the resume. Speak to 2 people in the industry. Research current opportunities. Set a deadline for reassessment. Now the issue is no longer floating in mental fog. It has edges. It has movement. And movement reduces the emotional intensity that fuels overthinking. Overthinking also thrives on false standards. People often tell themselves they must be completely certain before acting. But certainty is a luxury most real decisions do not offer. If you wait for the feeling of total confidence, you may wait indefinitely. A better standard is this: do I have enough clarity to take the next reasonable step? That question honors reality. It does not demand perfection. It only demands usefulness. Pressure makes all of this harder. When time feels short, stakes feel high, or other people are waiting on your response, thinking can become distorted. You may feel urgency where there is only discomfort. You may confuse speed with wisdom. Or you may freeze entirely because the weight of the decision feels too large. This is why solution-focused thinking becomes especially valuable under pressure. It keeps the mind from collapsing into emotional urgency. The first step is to separate pressure from importance. Something can feel urgent without being deeply important. And something can be deeply important without requiring an immediate answer. This distinction protects you from rushed decisions. Example: a pressured decision at work may not need a final answer in 5 minutes. It may need one stabilizing action, one missing piece of information, and one calm conversation before the full answer is chosen. Mini conclusion: overthinking repeats the problem without transforming it. Clarity under pressure comes from structure, proportion, acceptance, and the next wise step. Chapter 9. Handling difficult people and thinking clearly in relationships. Many problems in life are not technical. They are relational. A deadline issue may actually be a communication issue. A stressful workplace may be shaped by one difficult personality. A family conflict may continue not because the facts are unclear, but because emotions, history, and expectations keep colliding. This is where solution-focused thinking becomes deeply practical. Because difficult people can easily pull the mind back into problem obsession. You start thinking about what they said, what they meant, how unfair they are, how exhausting they are, how often they do this. All of that may be true, but the question remains, what response is useful? Solution-focused thinking does not require pretending difficult people are easy. It asks you to stop giving their behavior total control over your internal world. One of the first shifts is this. Instead of asking, "Why are they like this?" ask, "What pattern am I dealing with?" Patterns are easier to respond to than personalities. You may never fully understand why someone is defensive, controlling, passive-aggressive, dismissive, or chronically unreliable. But you can often identify the pattern clearly enough to adjust your response. Do they escalate when corrected publicly? Do they avoid accountability unless expectations are written down? Do they create confusion through vagueness? Do they respond only when consequences are specific? These are actionable observations. A second shift is to focus on boundaries, not fantasies. People often waste enormous mental energy hoping a difficult person will spontaneously become easier. Sometimes that happens. Often it does not. Solution-focused thinking asks, what boundary, structure, or communication style would reduce the damage here? That may mean shorter conversations, written follow-up, clear deadlines, less emotional explanation, more direct statements, less access, more consequences, or, in some cases, greater distance. Notice how different this is from emotional fixation. Emotional fixation asks, why do I have to deal with this person? Solution focus asks, how do I deal with this pattern wisely? There is also a difference between influence and control. You may be able to influence a difficult person through calmness, clarity, and consistency. But you cannot control them. And many people waste energy trying. A parent with a resistant teenager, a manager with a volatile employee, or someone dealing with a manipulative family member may keep searching for the perfect explanation that will finally change everything. Sometimes explanation helps, but often what matters more is structure. What is expected? What happens if that expectation is ignored? What will I no longer participate in? What tone will I refuse to match? What am I willing to do consistently? Consistency matters because difficult dynamics are often sustained by emotional unpredictability. When one person becomes more grounded, more structured, and less reactive, the dynamic begins to change. Imagine someone who constantly sends tense messages late at night. A reactive person reads every message immediately, loses sleep, and answers from agitation. A solution-focused person identifies the pattern and creates a boundary. Messages after a certain time are handled in the morning. Urgent matters must come through another channel. The difficult person may dislike the boundary, but the situation becomes more manageable. Or consider a colleague who interrupts constantly in meetings. A problem-focused response becomes private resentment. A solution-focused response may be to use direct language in the moment. Let me finish this thought. Or to set the agenda in writing ahead of time. Or to follow up after the meeting with specific expectations. The goal is not to win every interaction. The goal is to protect clarity and create workable conditions. This is also where emotional discipline matters. Difficult people often create emotional hooks. They provoke. They confuse. They bait reaction. If you respond from the hook, they lead the interaction. If you respond from clarity, you do. This does not mean being passive. It means being deliberate, firm when needed, clear when needed, quiet when needed, removed when needed. Relationships challenge solution-focused thinking because emotions, history, and identity become deeply involved. It is easier to stay calm with a spreadsheet than with a spouse. It is easier to think clearly about a process problem than about a family wound. It is easier to be strategic with a project than with a person who knows exactly how to trigger your insecurities. This is why relational problems require a slightly different form of solution focus. Not colder, just clearer. In relationships, people often become attached to proving a point. They want the other person to admit fault. They want to be fully understood before moving forward. They want emotional justice before repair. These desires are understandable, but they can easily keep a conflict alive longer than necessary. Solution-focused thinking asks a different set of questions. What is this relationship actually needing right now? Is this moment asking for correction, comfort, truth, boundary, or time? What response would reduce damage instead of increasing it? What am I trying to achieve here? Relief, revenge, clarity, or repair? These questions reveal motive, and motive shapes tone. Take a common example. A couple has the same argument repeatedly. The surface issue changes: schedules, money, effort, communication. But the emotional pattern stays the same. One feels unseen. The other feels criticized. Each new conversation quickly pulls them into the same roles. A problem-focused approach analyzes the last comment, the last mistake, the unfair detail of the week. A solution-focused approach zooms out. What pattern are we trapped in? What happens right before the argument escalates? What do we each need in order to interrupt that pattern? Would this conversation go better tonight or tomorrow when the nervous system is calmer? Do we need better timing, better language, or a better structure? Now the issue becomes workable. The same applies with children. A parent may focus only on the misbehavior, but solution-focused thinking asks what condition may be helping produce it. Is the child tired, overstimulated, confused about expectations? Testing consistency, seeking connection in a clumsy way? That question does not excuse bad behavior. It reveals what response might actually help. Friendships also benefit from this lens. If a friend becomes distant, the mind may rush toward hurt. But a solution-focused response asks whether clarity is needed. Should I ask directly? Should I give space? Should I stop assuming and gather information? The more important the relationship, the more valuable it is to slow interpretation and strengthen clarity. There is another relational truth worth remembering. Not every relationship problem can be solved through mutual insight. Some are solved through acceptance and boundary. Some people will not communicate well. Some will not change. Some will remain emotionally immature. Some will keep taking unless limits appear. In those cases, the solution is not deeper analysis. It is wiser structure. Example: in conflict, asking, "What pattern are we in?" is often far more useful than asking, "Who is right this second?" Mini conclusion. With difficult people and difficult relationships, solution-focused thinking means responding to patterns, building boundaries, choosing timing wisely, and protecting clarity instead of getting trapped in endless emotional analysis. Chapter 10: Daily Habits, Identity Shift, and the Next Useful Step. A solution-focused mind is not built in dramatic moments alone. It is built through daily habits. How you start the day matters. How you talk to yourself matters. How you handle small frustrations matters. The mind becomes what it practices repeatedly. If every day begins with reactive attention, checking messages, scanning for problems, feeling behind before your feet even touch the floor, then your nervous system is being trained toward problem orientation. It begins the day in response rather than intention. A solution-focused morning does not need to be elaborate. It can be simple. A moment of stillness. A written priority. One grounding question. What matters most today? That question is small, but it trains the mind toward direction. Journaling can also be powerful when used correctly. Not pages of circular worry. Structured reflection. What is the current challenge? What is within my control? What is the next action? What attitude would help today? These prompts prevent the page from becoming a dumping ground for rumination. Another daily habit is language awareness. The words you use around difficulty shape how the mind relates to it. If you constantly say, "This is impossible," "Everything is a mess," "I can't handle this," the mind absorbs that emotional framing. If instead you say, "This is difficult, but I can work one part at a time," the mind remains open. The goal is not artificial positivity. It is accurate and constructive language. Physical habits matter too. Sleep deprivation, constant stimulation, and lack of movement make problem-focused thinking stronger because they weaken regulation. An exhausted mind is less flexible. A flooded mind is less strategic. A body kept in chronic tension supports a mind that scans for threat. This is why basic routines are not separate from clear thinking. They support it. Rest, movement, food, quiet, and space all affect your capacity to focus on solutions. Another strong daily practice is the evening review. Before ending the day, ask, where did I get stuck today? Where did I move well? What problem did I feed with unnecessary attention? What solution did I move toward? What do I want to handle differently tomorrow? This kind of review builds self-awareness without self-attack. It turns experience into training. Micro-problems are especially useful practice grounds. Traffic, delays, misunderstandings, a change of plan, a disappointing email, a week that goes off track. These moments seem small, but they are where patterns are reinforced. If every small inconvenience becomes a mental drama, then in larger situations, the habit will be stronger. But if you practice redirecting attention in small moments, you become more capable in major ones. What matters now? What is still possible? How do I want to respond? These are training reps for the mind. One final daily habit is to reduce unhelpful mental clutter. Too much input makes solution thinking harder. Constant scrolling, constant comparison, constant urgency, all of it keeps attention fragmented. A fragmented mind is easier for problems to capture. A quieter mind can choose more deliberately. Even 10 minutes of reduced input can help restore internal order. Walk without your phone. Sit without noise. Think one thought at a time. This is not indulgence. It is maintenance for clear thinking. At first, solution-focused thinking feels like a technique. You remember to ask a better question. You pause before reacting. You look for the next step. You reframe a setback. You build a boundary. You move instead of looping. But over time, something deeper happens. It stops feeling like a tactic and starts becoming part of who you are. You become less impressed by panic, less seduced by overthinking, less interested in blame, less likely to confuse emotional intensity with importance. You become someone who can enter hard situations without becoming consumed by them. This is the identity shift that matters most. Because the final goal is not to use solution-focused thinking once in a while. It is to become a person whose mind naturally returns to steadiness, movement, and response. That identity is built quietly. It is built the day you choose the next useful step instead of indulging the spiral. It is built the day you speak calmly in a tense moment. It is built the day you stop trying to understand a difficult person perfectly and instead create a wise boundary. It is built the day you act before you feel fully ready. It is built the day you stop feeding the problem with every ounce of your attention. And because identity is built through repetition, these moments accumulate. The person you become is shaped not only by what happens to you, but by what your mind practices in response. People often want confidence before they change, but confidence usually follows self-trust. And self-trust grows when you repeatedly watch yourself respond with clarity. You begin to think, I know how to handle hard moments. Not perfectly, but usefully. I know how to pause. I know how to ask better questions. I know how to move. I know how to come back from reaction. That kind of confidence is quiet. It does not need performance. It does not need certainty. It does not need everyone else to agree. It comes from an internal relationship with difficulty. The person who trains this way also becomes more useful to others. In families, teams, friendships, and leadership, people are drawn to those who can think clearly under pressure. Not because they always have the answer, but because they do not make the moment harder than it already is. They create steadiness, direction, proportion, and these qualities are rare enough that they become a form of influence. This is one reason solution-focused thinking matters beyond personal productivity. It changes how you show up in human systems. You become less reactive in conflict, more effective in uncertainty, more constructive in disappointment, more trustworthy under pressure. And perhaps most importantly, you become less afraid of problems themselves. Not because problems become pleasant, but because you no longer assume they must swallow your mind. You know that a problem can be real without becoming total. You know that pain can be present without becoming identity. You know that uncertainty can exist without preventing movement. There is a phrase worth practicing until it becomes instinct. The next useful step. Not the perfect step. Not the guaranteed step. Not the step that resolves the entire future. The next useful step. This phrase matters because many people are not defeated by the size of their problems. They are defeated by the size of the solution they believe they must produce immediately. They assume they need a total answer, a complete turnaround, a full resolution, and because that feels too large, they do nothing. But life rarely asks for everything at once. Much more often, it asks for the next useful thing. The next useful phone call. The next useful conversation. The next useful boundary. The next useful apology. The next useful correction. The next useful hour of honest work. The next useful pause before saying something harmful. This is how stability is rebuilt. This is how confidence returns. This is how hard seasons become survivable. If you are overwhelmed, narrow the frame. What is the next useful step in the next 10 minutes? What is the next useful step by the end of today? What is the next useful step this week? This prevents the mind from drowning in the total weight of the problem. It also keeps your attention from being stolen by fantasy. The fantasy of total control. The fantasy of total certainty. The fantasy that a single breakthrough should remove all friction from life. Real life moves differently. It tends to improve through accumulation. One useful step may not feel dramatic, but 10 useful steps change the landscape. 50 useful steps change identity. And a year of useful steps can make an old life almost unrecognizable. This is why patience belongs inside solution-focused thinking. Not passive patience. Active patience. The kind that keeps moving without demanding instant transformation. A person rebuilding trust does it one reliable action at a time. A person rebuilding health does it one repeated choice at a time. A person rebuilding confidence does it one kept promise at a time. The mind that understands this stops despising small progress. It begins respecting it. And that respect changes motivation. Because when small progress counts, the threshold for movement becomes lower. You no longer need to feel inspired to begin. You only need to become willing. Willing to take the next useful step. There is humility in that, and there is strength in it too. Because the next useful step keeps you close to reality. It keeps you honest about what is possible now. It prevents you from performing productivity while avoiding the real issue, and it keeps your life moving in the direction of coherence. Coherence matters. It is the feeling that your actions match your intentions, that your response matches your values, that your mind is no longer scattered in 10 directions by one problem. And when coherence grows, peace often grows with it. Not because problems disappear, but because your mind is no longer multiplying them. That may be one of the most important transformations of all. A quieter mind, a steadier response, a life no longer governed by the emotional drama of every obstacle, just the next useful step, then the next one, then the next. And one day you look back and realize that what once felt impossible was not conquered in one giant moment. It was crossed piece by piece by a mind that learned to stop worshiping the problem and start building the way through. Example: a different life is often built by repeated next steps that felt too small to matter at the time. Mini conclusion: solution-focused thinking becomes real when it enters daily habit. And daily habit becomes identity when you keep returning to the next useful step. Final reflection: there will always be reasons to focus on problems. Life will keep presenting unfinished situations, difficult people, delays, losses, disappointments, and moments you did not ask for. The question is not whether problems will exist. The question is what kind of mind you will bring to them. A mind trained only in reaction becomes easier for problems to control. A mind trained in solutions becomes harder to overwhelm. That does not mean you will never feel fear, anger, grief, or frustration. You will. But those emotions will no longer have final authority over your direction. You will know how to pause, how to ask what matters now, how to separate fact from interpretation, how to turn the next step into a bridge instead of waiting for perfect certainty, how to build boundaries where needed, how to reframe what hurts without lying to yourself about it, how to move. And that movement matters. Because life rarely changes all at once. It changes one thought, one question, one response, one action at a time. It changes when attention shifts. It changes when the mind stops feeding what is broken and starts building what is possible. If you practice this long enough, you may notice a quiet transformation. You will still recognize problems quickly, but you will no longer live inside them. You will enter difficulty with more steadiness. You will recover faster. You will think more clearly, and your presence will begin to change the atmosphere around you. That is the deeper promise of this way of thinking. Not a life without problems, but a mind that knows how to meet problems without becoming one. The mind is always practicing something. It is practicing reaction or response. It is practicing helplessness or agency. It is practicing fixation or movement. It is practicing the habit of living inside problems or the habit of building paths through them. And because it is always practicing, every day becomes a chance to shape it. When something goes wrong, the old instinct will still whisper. Replay it, magnify it, turn it into a story about everything. Stay there. But another voice can be trained. A quieter one, a steadier one, a more useful one. It asks, what is true? What matters now? What is in my control? What is the next step? What kind of person do I want to be in the middle of this? Those questions do not remove pain, but they give pain less control over direction. And in the end, that may be what real mental strength looks like. Not a life with no problems, not permanent calm, not perfect confidence, but a mind that knows how to return. A mind that can face what is difficult without surrendering to it. A mind that keeps building direction where others surrender to confusion. That is the invitation here. To become someone whose attention is no longer owned by every problem that appears. To become someone who can meet difficulty with steadiness, honesty, and useful action. To become someone who knows that even when the whole path is unclear, the next step can still be chosen. And sometimes, that is all the power you need. The next step. Chosen clearly. Chosen calmly. Chosen again and again until a different life is built from it. So when the mind begins to rush back toward fear, blame, or helpless repetition, remember that you do not have to solve life in one thought. You only have to return. Return to the facts. Return to the breath. Return to the part that is yours. Return to the next useful step. That return is the practice, and every return strengthens the person you are becoming. A person who can feel difficulty without being ruled by it. A person who can see clearly enough to act. A person who does not waste whole seasons trapped in mental reaction. That is the quiet promise of solution-focused thinking. Not perfection, not control, not a painless life, but a mind that knows how to come back to what helps. Again and again, until clarity becomes character, and character becomes the force that carries you forward. One clear thought, one honest question, one constructive action. That is how people rebuild trust in themselves. That is how they regain direction. That is how they stop living as prisoners of every problem that appears. Not all at once, but steadily. And steadily is often how real change lasts. One step by step with clear attention.